Now our correspondent Jack Barton joined me live from Baghdad. Jack, welcome to the program. 15 years passed, and now what challenges do the Iraqis say they're still facing? You're in Baghdad. Tell us more about that. And also, tell us more about the situation in Iraq, especially after the withdrawal of the U.S. forces in 2011. Jack.
Well, the situation now is relatively stable when compared to the past 15 years, but that's relative, of course, in terms of what Iraq has been through. We still see the security checkpoints all through Baghdad, though traffic is flowing through more freely. Some of the blast walls have been taken down. Most remain in place. There hasn't been a major bomb so far this year, but the security remains tight, and people know this is a fragile piece. They expect more to come. On top of that, you've got the fact there are still millions of people displaced in the country, not all of them in camps, some of them living in the homes of friends and families. But I've been out speaking to them over the past few days as well. And they said, no, they're not ready to go home. They still believe there's extremist elements in the regions where they come from. And also in many places, they don't have a home to go home to. So all of this is going to take a lot more effort from the government and a lot of money. The Prime Minister says about $100 billion. All of this, though, stemming out of, as you say, the period after the U.S. withdrawal, when we saw ISIL really emerge onto the scene in that vacuum, also feeding into the divisive politics that we definitely saw in Iraq, not just after the withdrawal of the U.S., but before the withdrawal of the U.S., between various factions funded by regional powers, all of that feeding into ISIL. But now, again, a period of relative calm, but a very fragile calm, and looking forward, how to go from here to build some semblance of peace and prosperity.
All right. Many of us covered that war 15 years ago. However, how it has been transforming that region and the world is a more than interesting question. The question is, the country has been ravaged by the war and transformed into an almost continuous conflict zone. Foreign powers, political parties vie for power at the expense of the Iraqi people. Why the war lead to such chaos? How do the Iraqi people think about this?
Yeah, well, initially, many Iraqis, whether they were Shia or Sunni, welcomed the U.S. troops. They welcomed the toppling of Saddam Hussein. The problem was the U.S. had a military plan, and a good one. The invasion went better than the generals in the Pentagon expected. The problem was there was no nation-building plan at all, not a shred of it. So, the military campaign went fantastic. After that, though, it was lawlessness, there was looting, law and order broke down, and there was a political vacuum. Saddam had effectively crushed all of the opposition. The U.S. really did nothing to put a stable interim government in power. And so what you had was inexperienced policies, often with agendas along religious lines, often with funding from the Gulf states or Iran, all pitted against each other, feeding into what became, around 2006, a really brutal sectarian conflict. And I really don't know anybody here who didn't lose a family member or a friend in that. They don't know how many people died because so many people remain missing, and really the current situation has fed out of that.
Our own Jack Barton in Baghdad live for us. Thank you so much, Jack, for being with us. And that is our correspondent Jack Barton reporting from Iraq. Let's get the view from the U.S., the other country that is directly involved in this conflict. My colleague Asia Namdar is there with a man who fought in Iraq for the U.S. Army.
That's right, Tianwei. Thank you. I'm joined by Major General Paul Eaton. After 3 decades of service, he has retired from the U.S. Army. He served in Germany, Somalia, and Bosnia. He also trained Iraqi troops during Operation Iraqi Freedom. General, welcome to our program.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So the fall of Saddam Hussein in Iraq came relatively quickly, but the war lingered for more than a decade. In your opinion, sir, what were the issues? What led to this war dragging on year after year?
Well, the siege was set in 2003 when Secretary Rumsfeld and perhaps the President denied post-conflict planning on behalf of our military. So what we had was four-star generals complying with that. So Phase 4, post-conflict, was just not addressed. We did not have the right people. We did not have the right planning involved to prepare for the occupation phase. The siege was set in 2003 for everything that happened thereafter.
Do you think there was any doubt in the minds of top generals and the military leadership whether or not Iraq, in fact, had weapons of mass destruction?
Well, we saw Secretary Powell, his great undoing at the United Nations, which I deeply regret, but he believed it. And we had this intelligence system here in the United States that delivered to the United States the specter of weapons of mass destruction. Obviously not borne out. We didn't find any. And so we attacked Iraq on false pretense.
Thousands of lives lost, trillions gone, no weapons of mass destruction, General. Do you believe Iraq today is better off than it was 15 years ago?
It's a great question. When I got to Iraq, I found a people well-educated, both men and women. I found emancipated women in the universities. They were happy in the context that they lived. Life under Saddam was problematic. It was a dictator, a vicious creature. We don't have that in Iraq right now, but we never prepared for the inter-ethnic dramas that are still playing out in Iraq.
And did the power vacuum created by Saddam Hussein's ouster, the instability, the chaos, do you believe that is exactly what created ISIL?
Well, there are a lot of players in the region, and yes, that contributed to the rise of a Sunni challenge to the Shia ownership of the government. But a second-order effect was the development of a local hegemon, Iran. And other political actors came in to bear with their own interests. So we failed to accommodate the competing interests in the region.
The premise of the war, as we talked about, weapons of mass destruction, how much do you believe that has damaged U.S. credibility in the world? Next time they come up with another intelligence, disclosure that this country has this and that country has that and we need to go to war here and there, are people going to believe what top administration officials are going to say?
I believe that the American people have learned a serious lesson here, and that, and I believe that that lesson will endure. That America goes to war for vital national interests, not conditional interests, not stray intelligence assessments. We go to war, and everything that I personally do and my colleagues at the Vet Voice Foundation and Vote Vets do is geared to make sure that Congress does its job and constitutionally decides when and where America goes to war.
On a personal experience, sir, what was it like to be in Iraq, and what was it like to come back?
My time in Iraq, of course, I was a major general. My mission was to create the Iraqi military, and from whole cloth. I loved the job. I loved my fellow Iraqis. I think that the Iraqi population, the people, are amazing, and it was my great privilege to embark on that mission. Coming back to the United States, there was a saying at the time, President Bush sent the Army to war, and he sent the American people to Walmart. The American people have got to get focused. It's okay to say thank you for your service, but it's better to say, I'm going to make sure that we don't put you on a fool's errand.
Is there an image or a memory that will forever stay with you? Something you can talk about, of course.
Absolutely. I woke up the second night, after my second night, I still was getting up at 2 and 3 in the morning because of jet lag, and went over to the Republican Palace, ran into a couple of men that I knew from previous operations, and asked them what they were up to. And I was in running clothes, and I said, we're waiting for Ambassador Bremer to go on a run.
Paul Bremer. Mm-hmm.
And he shows up, asked me who I was, and I said, sir, I'm your guy to rebuild the Iraqi armed forces. And he said, let's go on a run. And we ran down the dark streets of the Green Zone at that time with 2 armed men behind us. And Ambassador Bremer's got some serious running capability and some long legs, so I'm going, man, I cannot fall behind on this guy. So it was a good run. We kind of bonded at that point, and that was the beginning of my mission.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Paul Eaton, thank you so much. Again, a personal side of the Iraq War, and also from someone who was in Iraq training Iraqi troops. Tian Wei?
Thank you very much, Asian Namdar, in Washington, D.C. for us.